I could do the silly bit.
Can you think of anything that you would like it if the world was like that?
Since I've been studying more, I kind of have started to realize how how hard it is for people to listen, properly listen to each other.
Yeah, that's true.
And I feel like that's kind of quite a key thing that really facilitates a lot of de-escalation and misunderstandings and just, I don't know, it seems to kind of be the root of a lot of things in friendships and relationships, work relationships, familial relationships, and it's quite it's a very basic fundamental thing, but it's also so hard to actually come across. There's just far and few between that you do come across people really listening to one another and attuning to what's being said in a way that you're kind of able to put your own shit to the side and just hear and receive them as they are in an accepting way.
I feel like it's quite built into our culture as well, that we learn that what people do is people make points about what they think. It's not really, we don't have a lot of examples in our culture of people communicating on a public level where they're making space to hear an opinion that's maybe opposite to theirs. And maybe there have been cultures, or there are cultures around the world where things are conducted more like that, just as a built-in part of their culture.
Yeah, I think it happens it can happen. It doesn't necessarily have to be well, when I think of culture, I think of you have your own family's culture too, and that this can happen, on a really small scale of just some key fundamental people in your constellation of your life being able to listen without feeling, I don't know, just so I feel I want to say offended or impacted, but I think to an extent we all do emotionally react, and that's how we empathize with one another. But to kind of hold that in a mid-air space, that just allows a free flow of communication and connection. But I don't know, more recently that seems to be something that's I can really pinpoint specific people I have in my life that are able to listen in that way. And it seems quite unique, and I suppose generally learn through experience.
So when I think about people in my life that I think have that ability, I think it's something they're making this fundamental assumption that I don't want to cause them any harm, and maybe what I say is going to make them feel some negative emotions, but they're going to assume that if we can just understand each other more, they'll realise that emotion was misplaced, or that we both want for neither of us to be feeling negative emotions, so that's okay that they felt that, but they don't need to be oh, you made me feel that, you made me a big problem,
Mm.
now I'm pissed off with you, and like shut down the walls to just hearing me out why I did or said whatever I did or said.
Mm.
What do you think that people are doing instead of listening to each other?
Protecting themselves.
Yeah. This comes from a place of fear and like assuming that people mean to cause you harm and are a threat to you.
Yeah.
So I guess it probably starts really early in your life based on your interactions with your immediate family and stuff.
Yeah, but I think it can be learned later
Yeah,
through experience
for
too.
sure.
Like when you are exposed to that kind of environment where there is like, you know, listening, active listening
Yeah.
happening, it's, you know, can breed more of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it can come from like your formative years as it's like a skill that you have, but I think also from like later years, like you can tune into that and develop it also. So I guess I think that's like quite a thing that I am into.
Yeah.
Like good communication and listening, but it's hard. Like it's not easy all the time.
I feel like a lot of it being hard is because we live in a society where a lot of people feel under a lot of pressure, and like there's so many things in their life that they're having to work really hard to just keep themselves okay in a lot of fundamental ways. So you kind of entrain this feeling of fear and of being under threat, and then you project it out onto your relationships.
Yeah, I guess, I suppose I say this thing about listening because I kind of work under to a degree, like the assumption that I don't have like the capacity to make great change on big things that like are those pressures. So I don't know if that's like maybe me calling myself a realist, or just like maybe to some that might seem like kind of giving up or something. But I think you know, if this is the world, this is, you know, if these are the pressures that exist in the world that I live in, then the thing that I do have the power to have an impact on is you know, people in my immediate life and relationships. And like I was saying before about being exposed to these kinds of environments and feeling a positive impact from it, I think that there's a trickle effect.
Definitely,
and that's kind of what I believe in. Yeah, I think so.
Well, I think I've experienced that in my life, and I think a lot of people, I've seen a lot of other people have the same experience of like the greatest changes happen in your development as a person when you find yourself around people who are living and behaving in a way that is, you know, that you prefer to what you've known previously. So like maybe like most of us have grown up in a situation that's very influenced by sort of standard mainstream culture that doesn't have a lot of understanding of like ways to relate to each other that are positive and that like help you to be a better person and stuff like this. And at some point in your life you'll find yourself amongst people who have really worked on that. And you can have read and thought loads about it beforehand and have a lot of ideals, but they don't really come, you can't really put them into practice until you see them in practice and you find yourself in a space where that's just the natural way that people interact with each other. Do you reckon the tea is ready?
Yeah. I think it's just quite a light tea.
Is it like black tea?
No, no. There's no caffeine at all.
What's
It's
it
just
called
bark,
again?
Lapacho.
Lepache.
Yeah. It's good. It does taste like bark.
Yeah. It's a little bit mushroomy.
Yeah.
Wow. It's really tasty.
Mhm. Yeah. What do you have? Like, what are thoughts you've had around this?
I think the way that people relate to each other is quite a key part of how I imagine a better world would be, and the way that people relate to themselves and that kind of constellation of themselves and other people and other life forms, that we would just have more of an understanding of ourselves as like a part of this bigger integrated thing, rather than experiencing ourselves as like separate individuals kind of in competition with each other. Like, you know, did you listen to that audiobook Braiding Sweetgrass?
About halfway through.
Okay. Did you get to when she's talking about the democracy of species?
I can't really remember because I often sleep to it.
Okay. Yeah. So I think that book, I mean, I don't know if any of it was like totally new, groundbreaking ideas to me, maybe, but I feel like it's kind of brought into clarity a lot of things as well that I was just sort of feeling but didn't necessarily have really good language for. And so ever since I listened to that, I just think about it all the time when I encounter things in the world, that like we're part of this whole system where there's so many like different parts of it that are all in these complex reciprocal relationships with each other. And like humans and other humans are in that sort of relationship to each other, and then we're in that relationship to all these other things as well, just in order to live, you know. Like there's a million things that you could just take out of the picture and we wouldn't exist anymore. So it doesn't really make sense to think of ourselves necessarily as in competition. Like, how could anyone win in the competition where everyone else in the competition you're completely interdependent with? You know, we're supposed to all win together, and then it kind of makes the win-lose metaphor not really make sense. The democracy of species thing is like, she's talking about some elections that are coming up, and how so many of the things that, you know, whoever gets in, whoever wins the election is going to, so many of the changes that will be brought into effect, or the ways that things will be done depending on who wins the election, are going to affect all of the life forms that live in that region and then beyond, because it's not like that region is a little isolated place. But the trees don't get to vote, the squirrels don't get to vote, the soil bacteria don't get to vote, you know, the salamanders don't get to vote. She talks about people as well, like going out to the road at the time when the salamanders are, they like go to, they like all the salamanders from everywhere travel to a certain place to all meet up and have like a big orgy ready for the next generation of salamanders. And they've always gone to this place for as long as there have been salamanders. But now, for a lot of them, the route for how to get there has a massive road going through it, and loads of salamanders get squished every year. So she goes down there with her children, and they meet a bunch of other people who have gone down there to just pick up the salamanders and carry them to the other side of the road so they don't get squished. And stuff like that. Like, especially when I was staying at my mum's in Ipswich in the middle of this really busy city, I was just thinking about it all the time. Like, there are all of these types of life that are trying to survive on the edge of this type of world that some people have created that is so not conducive to their well-being. And that includes us as well, I think, or at least it includes me. I don't feel like living somewhere where, you know, I walk out of my house and there's like all of these cars rushing past me and the air tastes like cars, and I have to like hold my dog back from the road, and I have to walk for ages just to get to somewhere that we can like run around amongst some trees and stuff. It doesn't feel like that's how it's supposed to be, and that, you know, the only life forms I will encounter are other humans who are usually like quite stressed and afraid, and like insects that are like, what the fuck is going on, this isn't the environment that I'm evolved for. And maybe like some plants growing out of the cracks and stuff that look really beautiful in the summertime, but I don't know that that's really their ideal environment, breathing in all this car smoke. I mean, maybe plants don't breathe in exhaust fumes, but it's like getting into the soil and stuff like this. It's when like everything's just really struggling to survive in this really inhospitable environment. I don't know, maybe it would be nice if we just had an environment that was hospitable for all of the beings that live there. So that's a big ramble about some aspects of my ideal world. Does any of that resonate with you?
Yeah, I think so. There's like a knowledge that there's an inhospitableness to my environment, and I feel that it's like kind of inherently wrong, in a way, but I kind of just try not to dwell on it too much, because it just makes me feel so unhappy, and so and hopeless, and kind of just like giving up, like just, you know, sort of like hands in the air, like what can you do?
Yeah, we're so powerless in that situation. Like, we're talking about things that, like, it's hard to think of who in the world has the power to change those things, you know, even like the wealthiest people and the politicians with the most influence and stuff like this. Like, I mean, maybe if they all got together they would have the power to change that, I reckon, but like, we don't have any power to make that happen.
In this part of the world right now, it just feels like so far gone, like so irretrievable almost, right? And simultaneously there are areas that I've lived in, like where we were living together, where it felt much more like, actually no, you can, you know, there is life here, and there is pockets of harmony, and, you know, even in that small lot that you have, you can build on this thing that already exists, and invite and facilitate more abundance for you know, all the living things around us. Which is funny though, because that makes me remember, like, in that book that you were talking about too, she was talking in one chapter about the language and how everything is like alive.
Yeah, and like, in the Potawatomi language, how everything's a verb.
Yeah, exactly. That was it. But, you know, I don't feel like that really about these objects around me now, in this room, especially.
You don't feel like they're verbs?
Yeah. Do you?
I think so, yeah. I mean,
Just want to,
okay.
like the sofa and the table.
Well, they're all like,
I don't interact with it on the basis that it is, I suppose.
maybe not in the same way that she was talking about it, but I think a lot about things in terms of their transience. Like, this is a sofa right now, but it's made of like, what this is like plant fibers, right? And maybe some plastic that's made from oil, and like the frame is made from wood and stuff like this. And that everything's like, it at this point in time it's doing this sofa thing.
Yeah,
And like
okay.
before it was doing some other stuff, and one day in the future it will be doing some other stuff as well.
Okay, so I think of it as like, I mean, I really hope that it continues to have life around life.
Yeah.
But I suppose in some way I kind of just envision it being in a dump at the end and just like incinerated or left to rot.
Yeah. But those are like parts of the processes of life as well. And it's really woven into the processes of human life and how we deal with the other things around us.
So I suppose that's kind of like me thinking of it like that, and then death is just pure closure and not a part of a continuum.
And like also it has this certain life in terms of its purpose, like why you have a sofa, you know, because there's things that you want to do that involve sitting down in a comfy place. And like that's part of the thing I was thinking about before, where we're like we're not these like all of these like separate objects, we're all part of this organic system, even with the like inanimate objects around us, you know. Like I could live in a world with like no sofas and no teapots and all of these things, but I would be like a less high functioning version of what I could be if I could be in collaboration with many other things and many other life forms. But I think that whenever I come into a space that's your space that you live in, it has a similar vibe to it over many years and in many different places, you know, of like this little oasis haven that's like very peaceful and beautiful, and you know, like with these things like just like books, like loads of really good books everywhere, and like objects that are like mementos that you've gathered along the way, and like things that are like beautiful artifacts that you've collected that somebody made, that's like well made and has some like character to it. And I feel like that's kind of like quite a stark contrast with like just the world that it's like a little capsule within, you know.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I think that's true. I think there is an intention in that. I need that.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, it's kind of just feels clinical and cold and meaningless.
Yeah.
Which is what a lot of things, you know, a lot of streets often do feel like.
And a lot of the time, the aesthetic of the world outside of the little havens that have been created by people in their own homes is like the aesthetics completely curated by people whose intention in doing that is either like pure functionality or doing it as cheaply as possible, or doing some kind of like presenting some kind of message that's going to lead to whoever put it there making some money, rather than it being, you know, rather than that aesthetic being curated with the intention of let's make it really nice for us to be in this space, and like let's put some things that remind us of like why we've enjoyed being here and stuff like that.
yeah, it's kind of funny when you put it like that, because that just makes, that kind of just gives me a feeling of sadness, I suppose, that it's just, it seems like such a fundamental thing to do, to a way to interact, kind of appreciation and symbolicness and ode. Yeah, that's just like, the majority of the time it's not. There's that, like you said, those three reasons. Kind of, just overtake that.
But then, like, hidden amongst it all, there's zillions of little havens that people have created away from it. People obviously want to be in a more beautiful environment, and an environment that is, has the things that are meaningful to them, like, written into it in some way. So, but we just have to, like, find our own bit of space to make that in, if we're lucky, rather than all collaboratively making it just throughout our worlds. And that's something that I thought about a lot when I was reading Braiding Sweetgrass as well, because she's writing from the perspective of being, like, their ancestors were indigenous American people, that their land was colonized and their culture was, like, criminalized and pushed to the edges and almost erased. And they've had to, like, work, like, covertly beneath the surface of society to keep that alive and to pass that on to each other. And she was talking about what it means to her to be indigenous to somewhere, is that you're not, like, interacting with that colonizer culture, you're just interacting with the actual land and the world of living things that is there, that is just being inhabited by this colonizing culture, but it's still there underneath it and around the edges of it. Because the indigenous culture was just all about being in reciprocal relationships with the environment and with the other living things and with each other. And that's still there, like, it's harder to do when there's this, like, entity in the middle of all of it that's like almost like, what am I trying to say? Yeah, that's basically eating away at any possibility of that way of life, because all the other life forms, it's being made really hard for them to live there. All the people are being pushed apart from each other and trained to not feel like they're a community together. The land is being, like, built all over and, like, really poorly looked after. And so I'm reading this book and living in Ipswich, which is, like, a really built up, ugly, dirty city, and
but just I have that as well, like, when I've been listening to it, just listening to it for 5 minutes just feels like a moment of salvation. Because it just reminds me, like, really, really brings me down to the ground. But also up to the sky and the stars. And just kind of centers me, I suppose, between both of those things. Even though everything around me is, like, just concrete. But also, you're right, it's not all just concrete. There are small pockets everywhere of life, striving to live.
So I'd be listening to that book and then, like, going out to just like I could walk along the riverbank quite near to my mum's, and there's like a little narrow strip where there's so much stuff growing, and there's like a massive road right here in the river here which is really polluted, and the train track going above it. But there's this like little strip of life running along the edge of it where there's like wild beetroot and fennel and mugwort and all this stuff growing, a crabapple tree, like a really tiny one that I don't know if anyone else in the whole town has even noticed is there. and like they were painting the wall along the edge, and one day I came down there and all the plants were like spattered in paint and stuff, but they're still just like doing their thing in spite of the fact that the environment's so inconducive to it. And I just go down there to like be near to some of the indigenous life of this place rather than the colonizer culture that's all around it, and like take offerings. Like it was really dry in the summer, so I'd always like take some water down and try and give everyone a little bit of water and stuff, because that was a really big thing to me reading that book, like at that point in time that I really needed to hear, like really near to the beginning of it when she's talking about gratitude, and that like I don't remember exactly what she said, but what I took from it was that no matter how much you feel bitter and resentful about things in your life and in the world, there will be things that you can be grateful for, and like just focus on those things and be really grateful for them, and do what you can to whatever you're grateful for, try and give it something to be grateful to you for. And if you take that mindset, it just makes so much difference to your experience. Like it sounds really trite and kind of obvious when I say it,
but it's really hard to kind of come to, like I find, sometimes I use a different word, like instead of being grateful, maybe I'll be like at work or something, or coming, and I'll be like in the middle of a really stressful day, or just doing really admin stuff, whatever, stuff that doesn't always mean that much to me, and then I'll be like, I just need to water my plants. And it really needs to just be in the bath. I really just need to sit by the window and look at the sky, and I don't think of it as like necessarily being grateful, but I think of it maybe more as like I don't know, being present, and mindful. But I think you can kind of move in between those words,
because
and they can offer some of the same flavors of relief.
And I feel like for me there's a lot of similarity between those feelings, because it's like if you're being present in the moment, unless you're maybe like in complete despair and you're being really present with that, you're like, you know, rather than focusing on things that are bringing you down, you're being present and recognizing like, well, this moment is fine, and like I have this moment at least, you know.
When like from what you were just saying there about the moment, I had it recently also, like just 2 weeks ago or something, on my way home, and I just was kind of like, my brain was sort of whirring like, it's so crazy that I am where I am right now, and so much changed so quickly, and it's just like a whirlwind, but also overwhelming, but also so many things, just like so many things were coming up, and and then I remembered, you remember Justin?
Of course.
So in that year that we were living up there, he had in his like horse show thing, box shoe thing that he was doing, he had like a little card, and that was like the theme of that one, and it just was like, it was like, time is, as I am here now, and I was like, that's it. That's it. No, yeah, that's really it. And I think that kind of, crops up in like what you were saying about not focusing on all the things, but allowing them to be there, acknowledging that they're there, like all of the stars are there, but also you're here, and you're here now, and time is always moving the way it is, like life, like the difficult things, the beautiful things, the surreal things. That's the nature of time and living. But you're here now. So I really just always remembered that, and it gives me like a lot of peace, because it seems to encapsulate everything for me.
What is it? Time is as you are here now.
Yeah, but maybe I've twisted it a bit to make it like more.
No, that sounds right. I think that is it.
Yeah.
Time is as you are here now.
Yeah, no, it's I am here
As
now.
I
So
am
to
here
the
now.
reader, you're
Yeah.
always saying it to yourself. Yeah.
Because it's kind of a personal experience.
Yeah. And it was quite funny because I just like got into bed and I just said to Felix, time is as I am here now. And then fell asleep. And then he had a really interesting like take on it the next day.
Well, this is the thing that really frightens me about the kind of mainstream culture that we live in. That I feel like there is no room for that, and there's no like pointers to the idea that might be something that's worth noticing. Like just that you having the experience you're having right now.
Yeah.
Like, so many people, I think, don't ever spend any time just being like with themselves, in their mind, in their body, in their
it's
moment there
terrifying.
and now. Like even, when you're on the toilet, you're still looking at your apps on your phone or whatever. Like, like any of the kind of activities that you would do alone, where you might, in another world, have a moment of just pure experience of yourself and of yourself in connection with everything else around you in that moment. Instead, you're like listening to something, or you're watching something, or you're like thinking like mad about something that has nothing to do with the fact that you're here now. And I think that's really, really bad for your mental well-being, and maybe it's kind of wasting your life if you never stop and notice that you're you doing your life. That's something that I really appreciated when I was at the Vipassana. Like I spent loads of time not meditating, just like hanging out with myself in my mind, having jokes with myself and having debates with myself and stuff. And I was like, oh, I'm doing it wrong, I'm meant to be meditating. But then I kind of had this feeling of like, I'm also realizing that like, I don't know, I'm here having this experience where I'm not allowed to be in interaction with anybody else for 10 days, but it's like I'm here with my friend, because I'm here with myself, and we're just chilling in my mind and in my body and in this beautiful place that we're allowed to stay in.
I think that's something that I just started like tapping into again in like the last 4 years. Like initially just like in small, very small lips far apart, and now it feels like a place that I reside more often. But and I remember kind of coming out of like one friendship and being like, wait, just being here by myself. Wait, like actually I am my own friend. And actually like quite like being my own friend. It's really nice. But it's kind of tapping into that voice, inner voice, or however you want to call it, really. But it's interesting though, because that, I don't know, thinking about that and then thinking about like how you were saying things being quite like individualistic and separate.
Yeah.
Like, what's the crossover between these things?
Yeah, it's
How
strange
do they
because
link into one another for you?
we have this incredibly individualistic culture in which no one or everyone's encouraged not to actually know themselves and be okay with themselves and be able to be alone with themselves without any distraction from it. So I don't know, it's not something I've thought about, that like dissonance of that enough to have anything really profound to say about it. But I feel like there's something significant about that. Like,
Yeah.
maybe that's part of why this culture feels so wrong to so many people, is because there's so much focus placed on something that you're not allowed to focus on and that you're not taught how to focus on and stuff. So the self isn't like the actual self. The self that you're like fighting for all the time isn't actually yourself. It's like what you want other people to see of yourself, your successful job and your successful
like
relationship
focus on
and
your
all that
assets.
stuff.
Assets rather than your being.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, it's like, you know, we are individual and our brains work in our own way. We can never really perceive one another in the same way. We can never perceive the same thing twice, or experience the same thing twice. The same. So that in itself kind of is almost that in itself is an indicator towards the individual experience. But we all need the same thing. We all need the connection.
Yeah.
To be deprived of connection is, not good.
Yeah, I mean, it's really basic fundamental need that we have, the same as needing, well, I think everything that we need is really to do with connection, or you can characterize it in that way, right? We need food, which is connection with all these living things that food comes from, and we need water, which is connection with this living thing, the water that only nourishes us because of all the life that is full of all this stuff. And then we need each other, and we live in a culture where so many people increasingly are really alone. So those are like really obvious ideal world things to me, I think, like when you think about like old people who live by themselves and their family doesn't give a shit about them anymore because they're old, and like, or everyone that they've known is dead, or they never had a family and their friends have gone their own ways and stuff, and they're just all alone all the time. And like people with mental health problems, often in similar situations and stuff like this. There are a lot of things about our culture where when you think about it, it's just really obvious, okay, that needs to be different, that needs to be different, that needs to be different. Aside from like the more subtle things but then those things like people who are marginalized in our culture, the way that the world would change where those people weren't marginalized anymore and they had a space within our culture to be able to live their life in a way that was like meeting all of their needs. Those changes come about by these more subtle, hard to pin down changes to do with how we look at things and how we look at ourselves and each other and how we relate, which are harder to exactly pin down and much, much harder to actually put into practice when you've grown up in a culture that's so opposed to that.
Yeah. My friend Ugne talks about privilege in a way that she means like if you have to learn something as an adult,
Yeah.
that's like, so if you, like for example, eating well,
Yeah.
like if you're raised knowing how to feed yourself
Yeah.
and look after yourself with your food and your diet, that's a privilege because it's not something you've had to learn.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, you too.
Hello.
And I think that's interesting because I just hadn't thought of it quite like that in that way before. I had thought of it more as like a marginalised demographic of like being held back because of someone else, and like a way of being treated.
But I think it's kind of similar because I don't feel like it's the natural way for humans to live that we don't. Like, I feel like surely there have been many cultures that no longer exist because of this homogenizing force of the mainstream Western culture, whatever you want to call it. Many cultures in the past, like much longer ago as well, where, like, of course you grow up knowing how to feed yourself, look after your body and your health, and knowing how to relate well with the other people around you and stuff like that, because why wouldn't you? Like, we're here, let's do it well, it's not that difficult. It's almost like, I don't know what the opposite of privilege is, but like we've been brought into a world where we're already on the back foot. Like, it shouldn't be a privilege, you know, it should just be how it is, that you grow up knowing how to eat well and having access to the things that you need in order to do that. But in this society that we find ourselves in, that's a privilege. Just being able to not make yourself sick is a privilege. It's strange.
It's amazing how conversations are happening fast. It's really incredible. I love it. Felix and I drove to York and we talked for like the whole way.
Do you want to talk more about the thing to do with people listening to each other?
Not really.
Okay. It's probably finished then.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time and your really good observations and perspectives on the world. You've done a marvellous job.